First of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this second workshop on value selling. We have with us Mr. Orajit Kongoli, a senior business leader with around 30 years of experience in multinational and cross-cultural business environments. For 2 decades, Orajit has held leadership roles in sales and marketing functions with small, mid-size, and Fortune 500 companies in the IT industry. He has hands-on experience in driving demand generation and revenue growth in North America, Europe, and India. With few other business leaders, Orajit started Bizwin Consulting in 2014. He and his colleagues offer end-to-end sales management consulting and training to B2B technology companies in India and abroad. So without further ado, I'll now hand over the stage to Orajit and request him to kindly lead this session, please. Over to you, Orajit.
Thank you, Neha, and good morning to everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session on value selling part 2. But before I start, I think I'm getting a lot of chat messages, Neha, that people are not seeing the link which you have just posted. So maybe you would like to resend it to everyone. So I'm not sure why people are not able to kind of see the link of the session 1.
I'll again post it, Orajit, no problem.
Yeah, so you may post it. So ladies and gentlemen, Neha is going to post the link of the recorded session of the first session, value selling part 1, right now on the chat window. She has already done it. So kindly refer to that. So we'll get started with value selling part 2. Let me start sharing the screen and get started. I hope everyone can see the screen. So let me put it on a slideshow window. Now, many of you have already attended the value selling part 1 session, which happened a couple of weeks back. For those who haven't attended this session, I'm still going to do a quick recap of what we covered in value selling part 1 so that you can understand the common thread of the discussion between value selling part 1 and the value selling part 2. So this is what we have on our agenda today. So first I'll do a quick recap. Next, I'll discuss how to craft value proposition. That will be in the value selling part 2. Then we'll talk about value conversation framework. This is the crux of value selling. I would urge each and every one of you to give close attention. This is very, very important for value selling. And then we will kind of talk about outcome of the effective value selling and sum it up and wrap it up with a quick quiz. This is what we have on our agenda today. Let's get started with a quick recap of what we covered a couple of weeks back in value selling part 1. I hope everyone can see the screen which says value selling part 1. Let's get started. I'm doing a quick recap. So these are the topics which we covered: understanding value and value selling. Second, we covered step-by-step approach of building value. Third, we talked about 7 value selling fundamentals. Remember, as I discussed last day, there are 12 value selling fundamentals, 7 of which we covered in part 1 that happened a couple of weeks back. And then the 5 of the remaining value selling fundamentals we are going to cover today in part 2. Anyway, I'm going to do a recap of part 1, which contains the 7 value selling fundamentals, the first 7 value selling fundamentals. So let's get started. We started the day with a quiz. Again, I'm going to go a little fast in the interest of time. This is a recap session. This is not a detailed presentation of the value selling part 1. This is only for the benefit of people who missed the first session, which happened a couple of weeks back. So we started value selling part 1 with a quote from Brian Tracy, and then we discussed what is value and value selling. So what is value selling? We discussed value selling as the art and science of selling on value rather than on price, promotion, or prejudice. So we discussed in detail about what we talked about promotion. There are 4 types of promotion, and you can refer to the link which Neha is sharing, the recorded link, and you can understand what we talked about there. Then what is the objective of value selling and why is value selling necessary? Value selling is necessary to ensure sustainable customer lifetime value. This is the primary objective of value selling, to ensure sustainable customer lifetime value and expand customer equity. What is customer lifetime value? It is the net present value of the total margin, not the revenue, the margin that you will earn from a customer relationship. That is, if you are working with a customer for 5 years, 7 years, the net present value of the total margin that you will earn from that customer constitutes the customer lifetime value. And customer equity is, for an organization, is the sum total or the aggregate of customer lifetime values of all their customers. In which stage of customer life cycle is value selling important? Actually, value selling is important throughout the customer life cycle. But if you are in a hunting mode, you must bring in the value selling element as early as possible, because the later you enter into a sales cycle and try to do value selling, it's not as effective. It's not that you can't do it, but it won't be as effective. Then we talked about the definition of value. Value we defined as the ratio of benefits to cost to add, and adverse effects. Benefits are the totality of benefits. That's how we discussed the sum total of functional benefits, technical benefits, commercial benefits, emotional benefits from your offering. The benefits that you bring to a customer through your offering, and on the denominator are the cost, the totality of the cost, the total cost of ownership, including the monetary cost, energy cost, time cost, psychic cost, and so many other costs, and adverse effects. We discussed this also. Sometimes we ignore the importance of adverse effect in the value, right? Adverse effect is, suppose you are selling a product or a solution and it is bringing a lot of benefit. It's kind of maybe also kind of minimizing the cost, but at the same time, it's creating certain adverse effects. And we gave some examples also, right? So that you are delivering a product or a solution which is giving the necessary benefits. The cost is also pretty good. So customer is supposed to get value, but it is hogging a lot of resource. So it has an adverse effect, right? So everything needs to be optimized. Then we discussed about when you are designing a offering. Offering means everything that constitutes holistically that you offer. That includes your product, service, availability, the way you deliver, after sales support, the engagement framework, the pricing creativity, everything constitutes an offering. So when you are designing an offering, typically it has different elements. So for example, in the delivery, in the service, in the after sales support, there are several elements. So when you are designing an offering, generally these elements can be bucketed into 3 broad categories. We call it must have, linear satisfier, and delighter. If you map them across fulfillment of customer need and customer satisfaction, this is how it looks. There are elements which are must have, that if you increase them in your offering, it will not necessarily improve customer satisfaction because those are table stakes. The customer anyway expect them. Then there are elements which are linear satisfier. That means if you improve them in your offering or increase them in your offering, customer is increasingly satisfied. And then there are delighters, which the customers are don't expecting. But if you incorporate them, the customer will be delighted. So we mentioned that there has to be a very, very judicious balance when you are designing an offering for optimum value. All these elements need to be optimally balanced because everything has a certain cost and certain implications. For example, delighter has an incremental cost, right? Because this is something which the customer is not contracted for, but you are still giving it. So this is something which we discussed. Then we discussed about some examples of benefits and cost. I'm not going to read out everything. You guys know it. So why we discussed this? We wanted to show that to improve value, you obviously have to enhance the benefit and minimize the cost as much as possible, plus minimize the adverse effect. Now, cost is not necessarily the price. Again, cost includes so many elements. So you have to think of each and every element and see holistically how you can bring down the cost to the customer. Now we are driving towards value selling fundamental 1. So here we discuss that a value for a customer assumes significance. That is, whether this product or service is valuable to me as a customer, I will consider it valuable when I'm considering it. I am referring or I'm comparing it with some known or reference. That means when I say this particular mobile, this looks good, or your software solution, yes, this is fine with me. The cost is fine, but you know what? Your delivery time is slow. So as a customer, when I tell you this, you can be very assured that in my mind, I'm referring to something, either to a competitive product or to my past experience or something which I may have heard in some seminar or I may have read in an industrial journal. So to be a value seller, the value selling fundamental 1, which appears in the red box or red ellipse, as you can see on the screen, to influence the customer's value perception, you must know their point of reference. This is very important. Point of reference, is it a competitor's offering? Is it something which he has heard from somewhere? Is it published in some journal? Where is he getting his perception? Okay, so it's very, very important, right? So this is value selling fundamental number one. So all these value selling fundamentals will appear on the screen in red diagrams, red ellipse or red boxes with a numerical. So this is value selling fundamental one. You must be well conversant with this. Next, we talked about value in the context of establishing connection, right? So generally what happens, when we sell our offering, we are pretty much well conversant, but where we miss out is the business acumen. And this is very important, because for a senior decision maker in a customer's organization, your offering components or offering details are fine, but he or she would also like to understand how it is fitting in his or her business context. And this is where we miss out. This is what we call the sales credibility gap. So it's not just about the value of your solution. It should be about the value of solving their problem, right? This brings us to the value selling fundamental number 2. What is that? That you have to think like a business owner for effective value selling. You have to put yourself in the shoes of a business owner and see where they are looking at this offering. And always think offering. Don't think about just the product or the service. Think about your offering as a totality. And offering comprises your product, your service, your after sales support, your delivery mechanism, your pricing creativity, engagement framework, everything. Now let's talk about the step-by-step approach of building value. We talked about, before that, I discussed a mechanism which will enable you to think differently or newly. This is called a scamper technique. This is value selling fundamental 3. What is scamper? Scamper means if you have to redesign your offering, or you have to think of building a new kind of an offering. Offering can be any element of offering. It can be the product features, it can be your service elements, it can be the way you deliver, it can be your tech support, anything. So this is the mechanism which enables us to think out of the box, right? So you can substitute some of the elements, you can combine, you can adapt, you can modify, put to another use, eliminate, reverse, or rearrange. And I also mentioned that when you are doing this scamper, avoid these 4 pitfalls: narrow framing, availability bias, anchoring, and group thinking. Then we talked about step-by-step approach of building value. There are 8 steps. We'll go into one by one. And when you are building this, you must bounce off the process with your people whom you are close to, those stakeholders, like your early adopters, technical collaborators, your channel partners. So because you are building value, it's better to bounce off and make sure that you are on the right track. So let's take into account each step and see where the value selling aspect or the value selling fundamental is getting ingrained in. So these are the 8 steps for building value. Step 1, research and identify a need or a problem to solve. How would you do that? So you have to take into consideration the macro environment and the task environment factors. There are some examples of macro environment factors which we have put here: the economic forces, the technology forces, the legal or regulatory factors. These are all your macro environment factors. So you must take into consideration when you are designing an offering for a problem to solve. So this will enable you to understand what problems your target customer segment may have, right? Then you must understand the task environment factors, like your competitive forces, changing customer demand, social factors. These are important for you to arrive at the kind of problems the customers may be having. And generally, when we talk about problems, when we go to the customer, we discuss the symptoms and consequences perhaps. You also need to probe a little deeper to understand the cause of the problem and who are the victims of this problem. Meaning, is it the CEO which is getting impacted? Is it the head of engineering who is getting impacted? Is it the purchase guy who is getting impacted because of this problem? From this understanding, you can get a value idea, and then you can create or craft a solution where you see how you can give them benefits. Like, say, for example, productivity improvement, revenue increase, minimization of risk, minimization of cost. And based on that, you have to create a value capture model and take the value proposition. This is value selling fundamental number 4, generating the value idea. This is step 1, research your macro and task environment to identify a need or a problem for building the value into your offering. Next, we come. Step 2 is who is your ideal customer. So you must define your ideal customer in terms of which segment, which type of revenue, who should be the decision maker, what geography should I target, what complementary technology environment they should have. So this is step 2 in building value. This is very important. You should not target the wrong customer and try to do value selling there. It won't work. Next comes market entry. Step 3, select the right approach. Okay. What do we mean by the right approach? There are 4 approaches we discussed, and choose one approach at a time based on your offering and the target segment. You can have an approach where you say you solve a few problems or needs for a small segment. You solve a few problem needs for a large number of variety of customers. You solve many problems or needs of the small number of customers, or you solve many problems or needs of the larger number of customers. So this can be, you choose one approach. Again, for the same offering, the approach can be different in different target segments. So be clear about the target segment and the offering, and accordingly you should choose the approach. Then we talked about value selling, the next value selling fundamental, the blue ocean ideation, the value selling fundamental number 5. Sharpen your offering. How would you sharpen your offering? I hope you are aware of the blue ocean strategy. This was developed a couple of decades back by 2 persons. There's a book called Blue Ocean Strategy. It's written by Rennie Mauborgne and Chan Kim. You can go for this book. This is a very, very powerful book. It talks about how you should not just deplete your energy and resources fighting in the red ocean. Red ocean is highly competitive space, and try to see how you can create your own uncontested space. That is the blue ocean. Again, blue ocean is a journey. It's not a destination. So here we are saying that you can develop or some of those ideas from here and do it. How do we do it? So this is blue ocean ideation. So you have to go, it has to be an outward in, meaning you have to go out to the market and see for similar products or service, what is available in the market. And then come back and see what factors in your offering you can raise, okay, above the industry standards. Not only raise, but you make sure if you raise it, it's valuable for the customer. Then only you will raise it. Similarly, what factors you can reduce below the industry standards, which is valuable to the customer. What factors you can create, which the industry has never seen. What factors you can eliminate from your offering, okay, so that it doesn't create any redundancy. So these are a very powerful concept of blue ocean ideation. This will enable you to create either an updated offering or a new offering, which is more powerful and more appealing to your target customers. This is value selling fundamental number 5. We did an exercise with all the participants after this. And when we talked about fitting value into the value pyramid. What is the value pyramid? Typically, when we go with our software solutions or services, this is the value pyramid which we have to climb. At the bottom, we say we will give you savings, we'll bring the best quality, so on and so forth. Then the value pyramid, if you have to climb up, you have to develop knowledge and expertise in the technology architecture. When we say, hey customer, we are not only giving you a particular service, you don't worry, we will help you choose the right technology or architecture. Then we say, hey, we also understand the process. For example, we understand the procurement process for enterprises very well. So if you have a problem there, we will solve the process problem with application of the right technology and bring you efficiency, savings, and quality. Then we say, okay, fine. Maybe if you have the industry vertical, I know retail industry very well, or I know the discrete manufacturing industry very well. So that, the more you move up the value pyramid, the higher value capture you can do. And this enables you to shape the perception pyramid of the customer. So generally at the bottom, you are an opportunistic one-time seller. You become an approved seller, then you become a preferred seller. Then you become a key supplier and a partner. Preferred supplier is a supplier who gets the first right of refusal. Key supplier is a supplier who supplies product, solutions, and service to a customer, which is not easily substitutable. So that's why he's a key supplier. And partner is when the customer discusses the necessary strategy roadmap in the relevant areas with the vendor. So that's a partnership. Next, we talked about value proposition canvas. This is a very powerful, important way of building value into your offering and a very important aspect of value selling. So you have to read this slide from right to left. We discussed this. What are the needs? What are the wants? What are the rational driver behind the needs? What are the emotional driver behind the needs? What are the rational driver behind the wants? We all know what is need and want, right? Need is which is core. Want is what is objectification of the need. What is the desire? You know, when we objectify the need, I say I need clothing, I want a jacket. Objectification of the need is the want, right? So we generally, what we do when we go for selling, we talk to the customer and try to capture their need and want, which is fine. But you should also ask, why do they need it? Okay, what is the rational driver? What are the emotional driver behind these needs and wants? We also did a quick workshop on this last Friday. And it's very important for you to understand in B2B selling, rational drivers must be there for everything, behind every need, want, and fear. Emotional driver may or may not be there. In B2C selling, both rational driver and emotional drivers are there. For B2B selling or enterprise selling, emotional drivers may be there, may not be there, but rational drivers must be there. When the customer has a need or a want or some fears, you must identify and uncover what are the drivers, what are the, and position your offering according to the drivers, not based on the stated or implied needs. Stated and implied needs are understood, but if you understand the rational drivers or emotional drivers and position your offering, it will be better resonance with the customer. Next, we discussed about the next value selling fundamental, and it was a step 7, quantify the benefits. We talked about you can create so many benefits, right? So you can create so many benefits. This is the value selling fundamental number 6, quantification of the benefits. We gave examples also of benefits. There are different ways you can create benefits. You can create game creators. You can create pain relievers, right? For example, with your offering, if you're increasing the customer's top line, that's a gain for the customer. You are reducing his cost. If you're enhancing the customer's competitiveness, right? Pain reliever can be if you're improving his safety security, you are eradicating common mistakes. So try to quantify some of these benefits. This is very important in value selling. So this is what we call value selling fundamental numbers 6. And then final step of building value and coming to value selling fundamental number 7 is make sure you are protecting their investment and the interest with them. What do we mean by this? And I gave you an example, like, I come from Oracle, right? So when we were selling Oracle 11G, we were talking more about 12C. 12C was not even in the horizon, but the customer understood, hey, here is a company which is protecting me from my technology obsolescence risk. So in today's world, the top companies don't sell only on current competence. They also sell on their future competence along with current competence. So if you really want to make a mark in your market, you have to have a proper offering roadmap and show the customer that investment with you today will also protect their interest going forward. So this is very important aspect, and we call it value selling fundamental number 7. So that brought us to the end of value selling part 1, and we did some quick quiz, and many of you got it correct. So this is what we covered in value selling fundamental 1. So value selling part 1. So I did a quick recap. I know it was fast, but in the interest of time, we had no other option. So next we come back to value selling part 2. I mentioned that value selling has 12 value selling fundamentals. We have covered 7 in part 1. You saw them, and we are going to cover the remaining 5 today. All these value selling fundamentals are predominantly relevant for B2B selling. Whatever we are going to discuss in part 1, part 2, they are predominantly relevant for B2B selling. But yes, some of them can be applicable to B2C as well. But this value selling session, the value selling content is designed for B2B. So let's get started. So we covered the recap session. Let's go to how to craft value proposition. So what is value proposition from the customer's perspective? Let's understand what is value proposition. So this is a statement. 1 minute. So the collection of reasons why us buy. Okay, in essence, the factors that affect whether they purchase and from whom. This is the value proposition from the customer's perspective. Okay, and what is a value proposition? Positioning statement. It's a compelling, tangible statement of how a company or individual will benefit from buying something specific or buying from you in general. That is your value proposition statement. And this is the basis of your differentiation, right? Because this is how you're taking yourself to the market. So this is very important. How do we do the value proposition? So we'll discuss about it and we'll come to the next value selling fundamental. How do we do this? Value proposition creation, we do it in 2 steps. We call it broad positioning, which is step 1, and then competitive value positioning, which is step 2. Now, there are various mechanisms of doing broad positioning. We are going to discuss only 6 of them today. There are other mechanisms also, but I have chosen only 6 to discuss with you because in our B2B technology sales scenario, these are the 6 which are most common. First is attribute-based positioning. What is attribute-based broad positioning? Attribute-based broad positioning is when we are trying to position our offering based on certain qualitative aspects of our offering or a product or a service. When we say our delivery time is fast, you know, or when we say our defects in our ultimate delivery are much less. These are all attribute-based positioning. So attribute-based positioning characteristics is we are faster, we are cheaper, we are, superior, we are higher. So these are all attribute-based positioning. Is it a good way of positioning? Well, it's okay, but not necessarily the best positioning technique. Then we have category-based position. What do we mean by category-based positioning? When we are positioning our offering based on the category or target segment or domain or vertical where the customer belongs. Okay. For example, when we say, hey, customer, we offer the best procurement solution for discrete manufacturing. Or, hey, customer, we have developed a new type of point of sale solution for fashion retail. So this is a category-based positioning that, you know, we have a solution for specifically for fashion retail or for this kind of discrete manufacturing. This is a category-based positioning. This is a little more powerful positioning technique than attribute-based positioning technique. Then comes user-based positioning. Now, user-based positioning is when we position something based on the users of our product or service. I'll give you an example. Say Nike, you know, the shoe company, Nike. They used to position, our shoes are for athletes. So they are positioning for athletes. If you remember when Apple computers first came, we used to position that our computers are based for the graphic designer. So these are all user-based position, right? So when a typical safety equipment company would go and say, hey, you know what, our safety equipments are best suited for boiler operators in industrial solutions, industrial boiler operators. So that's a user-based position, all right? So in our software case, how can we say that? Say, for example, we have developed a tool for specifically to enable, graphic design, or a tool we have developed for software tester. These are for software tester or for graphic designer. These are all user-based positioning. Or we have developed a quick technique for the gamers who create the games. So these are all user-based positioning. Is this useful? It is useful, but it has a very niche application. You need to be very clear. It does not have so if you are very clear that you have developed an offering only for certain specific user groups, then only you should do user-based positioning. Otherwise, don't do it. Then comes application or usage-based positioning. Now, this is very, very powerful way of positioning. That means our solution or our product is suitable for a specific application. For example, you go to a factory that, I am a valve manufacturer. So I would say, hey, you know what, this particular valve is suitable for applying in high pressure, high temperature pipeline carrying corrosive chemicals. That's so my valve is suitable for that. It's a very, very application-based positioning. So for example, you may say, I developed a software solution primarily for high transaction situation in a bank. So I have a tool or a software solution that can improve performance, especially in the high transaction situation, especially in banks or insurance companies. Or you may say, you know what, today data is very important. Data communication is very important. We have developed a tool specially for to be applied to enhance data communication security. So these are all application-based positioning. When we say we have a product to enhance or a service to enhance data communication security, or we have a solution to enhance performance of high volume of transactional situations in banks. So we are talking about application or usage-based positioning. This is a very, very powerful positioning technique. So if it is relevant for your business, try to adopt this. Then comes competition-based positioning. We recommend you don't do this unless you are pushed to do this. What do we mean by that? What is competition-based positioning? Competition-based positioning should be done only when the customer is referring to another competitor and is benchmarking him and comparing your offering with him. Maybe he's saying, you know what? Okay, you will do this in 3 months. Company A can do this in 2 months. Or your productivity is this. Company's A's productivity is this. So only when the customer brings up the competitor's name and mentions this as a reference to evaluate your offering or to assess your offering, then only you should do competition-based positioning. What do we mean by that? Then only you will say, hey customer, hang on, our offering is better than company A in this way. In productivity, we are 10% better. In cost, value for money, we are 5% higher. In terms of improving your productivity, we are 5% higher. So competition-based positioning should only be done when the customer raises the name of the competitor and brings it in the discussion to evaluate you. Then only you should do competition-based positioning. Otherwise, don't bring the competitor's name by yourself. You can always say, if you're doing attribute-based positioning, we are better or we are superior to available options in the market. You don't have to mention a specific competitor unless the customer mentions it. So competition-based positioning is positioning based on a specific competitor. You will name the competitor. That, hey, against this competitor A or B, we are better in this way. That is competition-based positioning. But again, in general, try to avoid it unless the customer brings it. And finally, benefit-based positioning. This is the hands-down winner. So you will try to do benefit-based positioning in every situation as much as it is possible. Benefit-based positioning, when you can show how you are bringing in benefits to the customer in terms of, as we discussed, the gain creator and pain relievers in our value selling part 1, right? How you are creating gain for the customer. Are you improving his productivity? Are you saving cost for him? Are you minimizing certain risks for him? Are you making his offering more competitive? Are you shrinking his time to market? What are the benefits you are bringing to him? Or are you eradicating common mistakes of their users? What are the benefits you are bringing to them? Okay, try to quantify it. So these are the broad positioning techniques. And that brings us to the next value selling fundamental, or value selling fundamental number 8, that select the right positioning based on offering and market. There is nothing right or wrong, right? You may combine two positioning provided they are relevant and compatible. So you can combine benefit based and application based, or you can combine, don't try to, combine category and application, because generally application based positioning is a refined and superior part of category based positioning. So if you cannot do application based positioning, you can stick with category based positioning. But if you can do application based positioning, you may or may not bring in category based positioning at the same time, but you must do benefit based positioning along with that. So you can combine one or two or three broad positioning techniques in your positioning statement, provided they're relevant and compatible. So this is value selling fundamental number 8 for B2B technology sales. These are the primary broad positioning techniques which we use. Okay. Again, you have to choose the right technique. Our recommendation is choose benefit-based positioning as much as possible. Try to choose application or usage-based positioning wherever is relevant. Also choose point number 2, category-based positioning. Choose 3 and 5 only based on situations. 3 and 5, and you can combine it with 6 also, benefit-based positioning. But again, it has to be situational or contextual. So this is very important. This is a step 1. I said that, your positioning should be done in 2 steps. One is this broad positioning. And what is the second step? The second step is competitive value positioning. There are 2 elements of competitive value positioning. One is you must know winning through what. What do we mean by winning through what? what is our ultimate, or what can be possibly our ultimate deal clincher based on our understanding of the situation? Is it the quality of our offering? Is it the service of our offering? Is it the innovation that we are doing? Is it the continuous improvement? Is it the adaptability, that we are very flexible and customizable? Is it that going to win us the deal or likely to win us the deal? Is it our market share, that we have done so many projects in this area? Will that enable us to get through? Whatever is the element you believe can be an ultimate deal clincher, that you should include in your positioning statement. Okay. There can be a combination of two also. It can be quality plus service. It can be, benefits plus product innovation, either way. And then comes the second element of competitive value positioning, which we call more for same, more for less. What do we mean by this? More for same means we are offering more benefits at the same price what the other competitors are offering. More for more is we are offering more benefits, but we are charging more. Now you don't need to divulge this to your customer, but you need to be mindful of this as an internal strategy, and accordingly you will refine your value positioning statement. You don't have to go and tell the customer our value positioning is more for more. No, that's a strategy internal to you. Okay, so you can adopt the strategy with the right segment, with the right offering, but don't do two different value positionings for the same offering with the same type of customer. Then you will send conflicting messages to the market. Don't do that. Okay, so there can be more value positioning options, but these are the more regular options. More for less means we are offering more benefits and we are charging less. When do we apply this? Generally when we are in a customer acquisition mode, or when we are in a new market, we want to adopt, or when we want to win few reference customers. Generally we offer more benefits and we charge less than what is available in the market, right? So more for less can be a value positioning technique for those kind of situations. Generally thought leaders adopt more for more. Why? Because they offer more benefits and they charge more, because they believe they deserve more. Similarly, if you are sharing the same product or service and charging the same, your value positioning is perhaps same for same. Then there is an interesting option, less for less. What do we mean by this? Less for less is a very important value position. What do we mean by less for less? That is, we are offering less benefits and we are charging less. Now, this is a little counterintuitive, right? Why should we offer less benefits from what is available to the customer? Now, sometimes it works. Let me give you an example. Say, I don't know whether you guys are aware of this company called HubSpot, a very good CRM application, right? So HubSpot started in around, I think, 2006. So before that, CRM space was, primarily owned by Salesforce and Oracle, right? They were the primary drivers. And I don't know if you guys have used Salesforce or Oracle CRM. This is very exhaustive, very, very good CRM, no doubt about it, but very exhaustive, a lot of features and functionalities. So what HubSpot did, they started going to the customer and say, hey, you are using Salesforce, you are using Oracle, and there are 120 features. Anyway, you don't use 100 of them, use only 20 of them, right? They said, yes. But then why you are paying them $100 per user per month? What I will do, I will give you only these 20, 25 features and functionalities which you anyway use, and create certain other aspects also and charge you much less. So that was a very winning proposition for them. So we will give you less benefits because anyway you don't need it, and we will charge you less. So sometimes this can be a market winning positioning, value positioning, right? And that is how today HubSpot is what? They are crossing $1 billion in revenue, right? Salesforce is at 20 billion, that's true. But still they made their own, they carved out a niche for themselves, right? So this is very important. So we have to combine the broad positioning, the winning through what, and value positioning to arrive at a value proposition statement which is appealing and compelling for the particular target segment of a customers for our particular offering. And this obviously drives your customer life cycle, which is engagement, customer satisfaction, loyalty, delight, and advocacy. Now here is a quick exercise that we will do. And all of you, please open your spreadsheet and create this spreadsheet. I will just open the slide, just copy this first. These are the 6 broad positioning techniques. Just note down somewhere: attribute-based, category-based, user-based, application-based. Just note down. Or you can take a snap on your mobile, that's fine. Remember, we are not going to share the slides with you, but you will get a link to the recording of this session. So you can just note down or take a snap these 6 broad positioning techniques. Next slide, take a snap of this winning through what and the value positioning techniques. Or you can note down or you can take a snap. So there are 8 winning through whats and 6 value positioning techniques. By no means they are exhaustive. There can be a few more, but these are the most common which come into the play. I hope everyone has copied or taken a snap. Now you do this exercise. You have 10 minutes. So open a spreadsheet for a particular offering that you're bringing. Choose a target customer and choose a particular broad positioning. Will it be benefit based or benefit plus category based? Winning through what? Should it be quality, and value positioning should be what? More for same, more for less, same for same, and try to craft a positioning statement. See if you can craft a positioning statement. Just do this exercise. This will give you a little bit of a hang of the things. So there is a question from Nitish Tyagi. He's saying, doesn't the application base and user base resemble? Actually, no. User base is when you are targeting positioning based on use. They are living beings. Application based means you are positioning based on a situation or based on the usage or based on an application. These are two different things. When you say this particular product is for safety equipment, is for boiler operator, that is primarily for that user. Okay, application may be, you know, in this general usage or in general application, this is more suitable. Okay, so that is how it is. Someone is saying, can you please move to the previous slide? Okay, I will. So this is the previous slide, if you can see it. So this is the slide I guess you guys were asking for. I hope you noted it down. So with this, we move to the next slide. This is how, just create the spreadsheet and try to craft it. What is broad positioning? What is, you know, try to craft this. Another 9 minutes to go. We started at 11:28. I'll stop at 11:38. Try to write something. It will help you. Because whatever you are learning, unless you apply, it will not stay with you. It may not be perfect, but attempt something. Someone is asking what would be the position, what would be the probability of a deal if our broad positioning is going to be competition and benefit based? There is, I'm not sure what is the probability of the deal. If you do the positioning better and you see at the end of the day, what is the objective of positioning? The main objective of positioning is primarily to ensure that you are resonating with the customer's aspiration or affliction. The customer has certain aspirations or certain problems or afflictions for which he is looking for a solution. If your positioning statement is resonating with the customer more effectively than your competitors and you are able to differentiate it, then obviously your chances of winning the deal is higher. So we are going to discuss it as the next value selling fundamental. You will see that. We call it RDS approach. So we will discuss it in a few minutes. Resonating with your customers is very, very important with your positioning statement. Someone is saying, what if the solution has more consulting services than a product? That's fine. Jitendra, when we say product, we mean an offering. It can be a solution, it can be a service. That's perfectly fine. By product, we mean an offering. Sir, can you please repeat what each of the columns intent? Sachin Sharma. Intent meaning what? So this is an exercise which you have to do based on the knowledge which you got acquired. So on the left side, you put an offering, put a target customer where you will, for whom you are going to craft this value positioning statement. This is an exercise by which you are crafting a value positioning statement for a particular offering for a particular target customer. How we are going to do it? You will put certain elements in you will choose the right broad positioning approach. You will choose the right winning through what mechanism and value positioning approach. Combine these three and craft a value positioning statement, which is marked in yellow, the yellow slide. So that is the crux of the exercise. Someone is saying, I missed the starting. Would a recording be available? Yes, it will be available. Someone, Ravindra is asking, while selecting winning through what, can we have multiple attributes point? Yes, you can. Remember, only the value positioning has to be single. You cannot have more for same and more for less at the same situation, right? But the other aspects, broad positioning and winning through what, can be combined. You can combine more than one together. But value positioning, it has to be only singular. It has to be only one for a particular situation. You have 3 minutes to go. Some Shujoy is asking, in broad positioning, it is always a combination of different positioning methods. Am I right? Yes, more or less so, Sujoy. But if you are fine with only benefit-based positioning and it's powerful and it's working, you can live with that. But in general, we try to combine more than one. You are right. Suhail is asking, how about enterprise customers, more for more, and SaaS product for small customer, less for less? Yes, it can work. Again, it has to be relevant. I cannot say yes or no without understanding in the specific context in which you are mentioning. But again, it can work. Certainly, it can work. You can have more for certain situation and less for another situation. Absolutely possible. But Either the customer segments have to be drastically different or the offering needs to be drastically different. You cannot take the same offering to the same target segments and doing different types of value positioning. Then you will send wrong message to the market. You will send conflicting message to the market. So don't do that. But for different target customers, different segments, yes, you can adopt different value positioning techniques. So how to use this if you are white labeling a product or selling something which you buy from other vendors, but at the same time you're selling something, right? Why would someone buy it from you? Whether you are white labeling it or not, why would someone buy from you? You still need to differentiate, right? So you still have to show the customer that why your offering is better than someone else's. So the positioning will help you, the right way of positioning. I think we are, at 10 minutes are over. No. If someone is saying, can we offer more for more and more for same in service segments? Obviously you can. Remember one thing, although it's mentioned as product, you have to consider it as an offering. Or let me put it right away so that you guys, I don't know why this thing is coming. So it's for offering. Yes, it will be applicable for both product, service, everything. So instead of product, you can call it offering. Let me make it offering, because some of you are getting confused. It's not necessarily product. It can be product, it can be service, it can be solution. Okay, offering A, offering B. It can be anything. You can offer, for anything, more for more, more for same. That's a value position for your offering. And your offering includes your product, service, solutions, delivery, everything, the totality. Moishik, what would be the probability that I think we covered? Positioning depends on where you are pitching and who is your competitors. Yes. Positioning definitely depends on what you are pitching, meaning what offering you are taking to the market, what target segment you are offering, and what is the competitive space. So Swarnadeep, you are on the right track. Right. So let's move on. I think people are getting the crux of it. Let's move on. So value conversation framework. This is the next. This is the most important part of value selling. Now, one aspect of value conversation framework is what we call the RDS approach. This is the next value selling fundamental. I think I got muted. So what we come to the next important aspects of value selling is what we call the RDS approach. This is value selling, the next value selling fundamental. Why it's important? And what do we mean by this? RDS stands for resonate, differentiate, and substantiate. So you have to, what do we mean by resonate? Resonance means how are we synchronizing with the aspiration and with the affliction of your target customers. So this is resonance. Differentiate means how you are distinguishing your offering from other available options. And substantiation is how you are providing the proof or evidence of what you are saying. So these are very important techniques to ensure that you are getting aligned with the customer. So until the main objective of the positioning or effective positioning that we discussed in the previous slides is to ensure that we are resonating with the right stakeholders in the right way. The way you will position with your CEO, you may not be positioning the same way with the head of purchase or with the head of engineering. So the resonance will differ. So the positioning message needs to be tweaked. Okay, so in order to resonate with the CEO, your positioning statement needs to be tweaked based on his aspiration and his afflictions. Based on the aspiration and afflictions of the purchase head, your positioning needs to be tweaked so that you can resonate effectively with him. Otherwise, if you are using the same positioning statement with everyone, you will not be able to resonate with everyone equally or effectively. So what we mean by this and how does it work? So let's look at this now. So resonate, if you can resonate, differentiate and substantiate properly, you will get more of sales wins. You may command premium fees and you may get customer loyalty. These are the probable results if you are resonating, differentiating and substantiating. Differentiating means substitutes are not available. The way you have distinguished your product in the customer's perception, you have created that customer, even if he tries, he may not be able to substitute your offering so easily, right? That's the way you have differentiated. Now suppose the resonance is missing or the resonance hasn't happened properly or the weak resonance, but you are able to differentiate, you are able to substantiate, still the customer may say, I don't need it. You are able to differentiate, able to substantiate, but because you have not resonated with the customer, if you're talking to the CEO, if you have not resonated with him, if you're talking to the head of engineering, if you have not resonated, if you're talking to a user or the purchase guy, if you have not, or the quality guy or the CFO guy, if you have not resonated with them, although your offering seems to be pretty differentiated and you are able to substantiate. So how do we substantiate? With the help of case studies, testimonials, so on and so forth. The customer may still say, I don't need it. Now what happens if you are resonating well, but you are not able to differentiate? But you still have some case study and testimonials, but the customer is still finding your solution to be highly substitutable. If that is the situation, then the first thing customer or the second thing the customer asks is, what's your price? So if in the early stage of your sales conversation, the customer is asking you about the price, you can be rest assured you have failed to differentiate in the perception of the customer. So you have to go back to your drawing board. So whenever you are encountering a situation when a customer or a prospect is asking about the price at the initial stage of your conversation, then you can be assured you have failed in differentiating your offering in the eyes of the customer. So you have to again go back to your drawing board and do the necessary things. Then comes, maybe you have able to resonate well, you have succeeded in differentiating also, but you are not able to substantiate, meaning you are saying, my offering is better, my service is better in this way, all these things you are saying, I will give you this kind of benefits, I will improve your productivity, I can bring down your cost by 5%, all these things you are saying, very good, benefit-based positioning you have done, but you are not able to substantiate, meaning you don't have the right kind of case studies, you don't have the right kind of testimonials, you don't have the right kind of reference. The customer may say, hey, you guys are good. You have, I like you. I like what you are offering, but you know what? I can't risk it. So this is very important value selling fundamental that you have to ensure that when you are going to the market or you are talking to a customer, whether it's your existing customer or new customer, you resonate with them well, you differentiate well, and you obviously substantiate with the right kind of evidence. Then only it will work. Okay, so this is value selling fundamental. And next, this in line with what I was just mentioning, when you go out to talk to a prospect or a customer, different people, especially in an enterprise, in a mid-size or large enterprise, there are different layers of hierarchy. And here we have mentioned that hierarchy in 3 layers. At the bottom are the operations layers or the users, the people who will be using your offering, people who are at the operations level. Next comes the middle management who are running the business. They're managing the resources. Okay, they're leading the people. And at the top are the executive. Now look at the bottom of this pyramid. There are 3 things you need to be mindful of when you are doing value selling. The decision criteria of these different levels of people, the time orientation and the personal agenda. Now at the bottom level where you are talking to the users or the operations people, their decision criteria for selecting your offering is primarily your features, functions, so on and so forth. Okay, what service, if you are selling services, what are the features of your service? What are the functions of your service? How is it getting applied to his scenario? These are the more interesting for him. And he is more driven by his present and past experience. What he was using in the past, he will compare with that, what he is getting at the present. And his personal agenda can be so many things. One of the things is to save his job, survival. There can be several other, but one of the aspects is survival, right? In the middle management level, Their decision criteria to go ahead with you is the cost benefit analysis. How much benefit they are getting and what is the, at what cost. That's the value, right? Value benefit. And they are driven by the present circumstances, whether it's a present need, whether it's a present problem, a present challenge, whatever it is, they're primarily driven by present. And their personal agenda can be so many. One of them is to become a hero with the top management. So if they know if they can solve this problem or fulfill this particular need in the most cost-effective way or value-effective way, they can get some brownie points with the top management. So that can be one of their personal agenda. And at the top level, especially, but in mid-sized company, the top level and mid-level are combined, right? But in large enterprises, there is a separate top level where the executive layer is driven by shareholder value. You can't say there and say, hey, you please take my product or solution because I'll give you this feature. At their level, they are not bothered. At their level, they're more bothered on how your offering, if they bring on board, how it will impact their shareholder value. Okay. They are driven by the present and future, and they see their personal agenda is impactful significance, meaning is your offering making any significance in their scheme of things at their level. Then only, they come into your consideration set. So when you are doing the RDS approach, the resonance, differentiation, and substantiation with the different stakeholders in an organization, you should also have this pyramid mapped into your mind so that you can apply it rightly. Next comes the conversation framework. Okay. What is the conversation framework? Okay. And what is the flow? Let's discuss that. So generally, when we are doing prospecting, we are doing the broad positioning and value positioning, what we discussed, right? And we are presenting it to whom? Generally to the decision-making unit and the main stakeholders. Decision-making unit comprises the decision makers, the influencers, the purchasers, so on and so forth. And this is generally the stages of conversation through which it goes. The probative part of the conversation is, the situation, what are the challenges, all those things. Then the qualifying part of the conversation, that is, you need to qualify the opportunity, right? That this is right for you. And how do we qualify? There is a technique, spin technique. You generally qualify based on the genuineness of the requirement, the timeline of the requirement, budget availability, the evaluation criteria of the customer, the decision-making process. These are your qualification criteria, right? So this is the second stage of the conversation. Then comes the third stage of the conversation, value conversation framework. Now, value conversation framework, although in this slide, it is positioned in a way you are primarily doing it for hunting. But value conversation framework, you can also do it for farming. That is when you are managing an account. So value conversation framework can be done for both hunting and farming. In this particular slide, it is the way it is represented. It looks like it is done only for hunting, but no, it's equally important for farming also. But remember one thing, this value conversation framework, which we are going to discuss more in the subsequent slides. This is the crux of value selling. And you cannot do this particular value. You can do the rest of other value selling fundamentals with most of your customer. But this value conversation framework, which we are going to discuss in the next 2 slides, this should be done with your top customers and with the decision makers of the top customers. You cannot do with the middle managers or with the junior people here. Okay. And only when you have done a value conversation framework, then only you should discuss the proposal. We rush out our techno-commercial proposal. Stop that. Customer may say, hey, send a proposal by this evening. But you can stop them. Say, customer, you will send the proposal. But you know what? We don't want to send the proposal. We provide the solutions. But whether we have the right solutions for you, we need to be sure. Then only we'll send a proposal. Otherwise, we should not waste your time. We don't want to waste your time. But we want to be sure that we have a solution for your requirement or for your problem. Then only we will send a proposal. And to do that, I have a few more questions. So you have to position yourself that way and delve a little deeper to understand the customer's situation through value conversation framework, which we discussed a little while back in value selling part 1. The needs, the wants, what are the rational drivers behind the needs? What are the rational drivers behind the want? And then what are the budgets? What kind of things they have? Only then you should send the proposal. Otherwise, your proposal will be just one more proposal in the customer's ET. So then what is value conversation framework? Let's understand that. Now, this is value selling fundamental number 11. So we are almost there. There are 12 value selling fundamentals. This is the 11th one. Okay. Value conversation with the decision maker. There are 4 steps for that. Number 1, commit the client to the DFS. What do we mean by DFS? DFS is desired future steps. What is desired future steps? You have to discuss it with the decision maker. Hey, customer, how does your business look like in the next 2 years? Why do you want to take the business to the next 2 years? Again, you can't do it with everyone, only with the CEO or the MD or somewhere. The customer may say, hey, you know what? I want to increase my revenue. I want to double my revenue. I want to increase my market share. I want to get into new market in the next 2 to 3 years. The desired future state is for the next 2 to 3 years. So your question should be, hey, customer, what is it that you want to achieve in the next 2 to 3 years? So client will say, hey, increase my market share, improve my revenue, all those things. Okay. Then you say, okay, fine. What can we quantify them? You are saying you want to increase the revenue by next 2 to 3 years. By how much? No, I want to double, meaning that means you will grow from 20 million to 40 million. Yes. Okay. So you said that you want to increase your market share. So how much? No, my current market share is 5%. I want to increase to 7% in the next 2 to 3 years. Say fine. So if you increase your market share, if you increase your revenue, will it increase your margin? Yes. How much? Maybe by 5%. So increase your margin by 5%. So you have to probe and get those questions and those answers from the customers that if in the next 2 to 3 years, where does he want to go? And what are the success metrics for that? Success metrics means if he reach there in the next 2 to 3 years, what will be the quantification of his achievements? That is a success metrics. Okay. Now you come to the third level of the discussion, what we call value for success. Meaning, hey customer, if you achieve this in the next 2 to 3 years, your revenue from 20 to 40 million dollars, improvement in your margin by 5%, increase of market share by 5 to 7%. In the next 2 to 3 years, if you achieve this DFS and success metrics, how will it enable your business to pan out in the next 8 to 10 years? In other words, if you achieve what you want to achieve in the next 2 to 3 years, what will it mean what will be this success mean for you for the next 8 to 10 years? The customer will say, you know what, if I get into $40 million revenue in the next 2 to 3 years, over the next 5-6 years, I will be eligible for a certain bank loan and I can improve my capacity. Or, you know what, if I increase my margin by 5%, I will become more attractive and I may be acquired by this particular company. I make so that is the value of his success. Or I may be able to get more because my margin will improve, revenue will improve. I will be able to hire a more talented team and expand my business in export business or in other geographies. Today I'm in America, I can go to maybe Japan and not Europe. So these are my value of success. That means if I achieve what I want to achieve in the next 2 to 3 years in desired future state and success metrics, this will propel me to get the value of my success in the next 8 to 10 years. Okay, this is where I will get. Okay, fine. And you have to prompt the customer in the discussion. Okay, customer. So then, how will you enable you to get some bank loan? Will you be able to kind of acquire some of your partners? Will it enable you to kind of in the next 8 to 10 years get you some more people, high talent? And if this is what the customer agreeing, that is their value of success. Then you come back to your drawing board and say, okay, how with your product, your service, your solutions, you can enable them in their journey. That's very important. This is the value conversation framework. So you commit the client to the DFS, you define the success metrics, you agree on the value of success, and then come back with, go back to your drawing board, come back with a solution, show them how you are going to enable the customer on the journey. So if you, and this cannot happen over one discussion. This has to happen over a few discussions. And for the customer to discuss this with you, you must be perceived as an expert. Otherwise, why should they even customers share their DFS with you? The customer, and this is your top customer, this is the CEO you are discussing with, why will he discuss his desired future state with you? He will discuss it only and only if you are perceived as an expert. Then only he will be comfortable in sharing. That is what we have mentioned in value selling fundamental number 2. You have to be, you have to think like a business owner and an expert. Then only the customer will be comfortable sharing where they want to go because they know this discussion will be valuable. So as a value seller, you need to enhance your knowledge about the customer's industry, customer's competition, customer's regulatory challenges, and so that you can be perceived as an expert. Then only this discussion can happen. This is a very important part of value selling, right? So, and if you can do this conversation successfully, the ultimate objective is the customer will think, I need this company more than they need me. So generally what happens, okay, if we want to increase the price as a salesperson, we think twice. Arey jayega, if I ask for, $10, $5 more, $10 more, the customer may say no, or the customers may say run away. He may go to the competition. That is the kind of alarm, or that is the kind of trepidation or the apprehension we have in our mind, right? But if you do value conversation properly and establish yourself as a value selling partner, then it will be the other way around. The customer, when he want to ask for some discount, he will think twice. Arey, should I ask for 2% more discount? This vendor may run away. I cannot afford to lose them. So now the balance is shifting. That is the ultimate objective of value selling, where the balance is tilted in a way where the customer needs and wants you more than what you need or want the customer. That is the ultimate objective. That is where you can consider your value selling is 100% successful and effective. That's an ideal situation, but that is where we aspire to be, right? And if you do it properly, obviously value selling enhances your customer lifetime value, meaning the total margin that you will earn from the customer throughout the life of this engagement will always improve, right? Now let's go into a little more detail how this happens. So now look at this diagram. This is perhaps the most important diagram in this whole deck. On the x-axis, you have time, and on y-axis, you have the activities. Generally, what you do when you are prospecting, you try to resonate with the right stakeholders. On the top, you see, you are trying to help the customer articulate the aspirations, right? You are talking about sometimes about the desired future state, where they want to go. And at the bottom, you are uncovering the pains. You are trying to understand what are the difficulties. You are employing spin techniques. And this is the initial value gap. So these are my aspirations, these are the challenges, and this is the initial value gap, right? This you are uncovering it, and the customer is already aware of it. May not be in a very strict way, but he is more or less aware in his mind, this is my value gap. And this is why I'm looking for a solution. Now, what you are doing as a value seller is, through this value conversation, you are taking it to the next level. You are telling him, hey customer, so if you do this, this is your desired future state. How will it impact you not only for the next 2-3 years, for the next 8-10 years? What is the metrics? What is the quantification, and how it will impact for the next 8 to 10 years if you get to the desired future state in the next 2 to 3 years? So the estimate and impact of success you are doing, and at the same time you have to articulate what will happen if it doesn't get there. Okay, and that is the actual value gap. So we have been talking about the initial value gap, and this is the actual value gap. Through value conversation framework, we are actually showing the customer that the actual value gap is much larger than the initial value gap which you have in your mind. Okay. So actually, this is the value gap. This is where you can go. And if you fail to go there, this is where you will land up. The actual value gap is much larger. And then comes your value selling fundamental 12, or the last value selling fundamental. You have to craft a solution that closes that gap with your offering, and tell them that this is how you're going to take them to the new situation which will close this gap. So this is value selling fundamental number 12. Okay. Craft a solution that closes the gap. First, you show them the gap, show them that actual gap is more than the gap which they have in their mind through value conversation framework. And then you bring the solution, craft the solution that closes the gap. This is value selling fundamental number 12. And then, and you bring the proposal, how you are best suited to enable their journey. This is what we were discussing in the previous slide. So if they are on this journey, how you are best suited to enable them on their journey with your R&D, with your offering, with your solutions, with your service. Again, you cannot do this value conversation with every customer. It has to be selective. It has to be chosen. And you can do it only for your top customers or top target customers, and only with the decision makers. The other value selling fundamental works for almost everyone, but this number 12, it will work only for specific high value customers. So you need to be very selective about that. So we will do a quick exercise on this. Why don't you target a 10 minutes again, choose a particular customer, and you can imagine what can be his desired future state, meaning where does he want to go in the next 2 to 3 years, and what can be his success metrics. Suppose he wants to increase his revenue, or suppose he wants to reduce his cost. That can be his desired future state in the next 2 to 3 years, or improve his productivity. And then you can put the quantification of that desired future state. Reduce his cost by how much? Maybe 5% in the next 2 to 3 years, right? Success metrics. Increase his revenue by how much? Maybe by 5%, or increase from 10 million to 15 million. Now comes the value of success. Imagine if he reach there in the next 2 to 3 years, how it will help him propel a journey. Okay. And do this exercise right now. Get a hang of it. This will help you. 10 minutes you have. In case you have any question, you can shoot through the chat or anywhere. So put it on a spreadsheet, choose any particular customer, think what can be his desired future state. Be in an imaginary discussion with the CEO of that company. What can be his desired future state? Meaning, where does he want to go in the next 2 to 3 years? And if he reaches there in the next 2 to 3 years, what will it look quantitatively? That is the success metrics. And then if this desired future state and success metrics happens in the next 2 to 3 years, how will it enable his value for success? What will be the, ये सब उनके success के लिए क्या माने रखेगा? How will it contribute or add value to his success going forward for the next 8 to 10 years? That will be value of success. Guys, you have 10 minutes, 11:55. We stop at 12:05. What you learned today, this value conversation framework is perhaps one of the most powerful value selling technique in the world today. So try to adopt it again. This value conversation framework needs to be very selectively used. So some Nitish Tyagi is asking, can you explain value for success again? Yes, certainly. Well, so what we mean by this, not value for success, it's value of success. Meaning, if you achieve what you want to achieve in the next 2 to 3 years in the desired future state and success metric, what will be the value of that success? How will that propel you in your business journey for the next 8 to 10 years? You means customer. Okay. If the customer desired future state and success metrics are intertwined, okay, interlinked. So desired future state is the qualitative statement. I want to increase my revenue. I want to expand my market share. Success metrics is the quantification of that. So desired future state and success metrics is for the next 2 to 3 years. Now, if you achieve that, if you achieve this success, how it will add value to your business going forward? Meaning how it will propel your business journey for the next 6 to 10 years or next 8 to 10 years. If you achieve the desired future state and the success metrics in the next 2 to 3 years. That is what it means by value of success. Again, this is for the customer. You have to get these inputs from the customer. This is not for your business. Remember, this is for the customer's business. You have to ask these questions to the CEO of your customer. and the inputs will come from the CEO of your customer. That this is where my desired future state. This is my success matrix. You have to prompt him with the right questions. And then say, okay, sir, if you achieve this in the next 2 to 3 years, how will it enable you for your journey in the next 6 to 8 years or 6 to 10 years? That is the value of success for the customer's business. So someone is requesting to go to the previous slide, okay? This is the previous slide. Okay. Slide number 12. Someone is asking for slide number 12. Okay. So let's go to slide number 12. This is slide number 12, guys. The first step in value conversation framework is commit the client to the desired future state. Yes, this is where you want to go. And then define the success metrics. This is quantitatively, this is how it will look for you if you reach the desired future state in the next 2 to 3 years. Then you talk about how this will make or add value to his success going forward, the value of success. So how valuable will the success of his first 2 to 3 years be? Meaning for the next subsequent 6 or 8 years. That is the agree on value of success. And then you have to show them how you will enable them on that journey. That is what is the step 4. What is the full form of DFS? Desired future state. It's written at the bottom of the slide on the left bottom corner. DFS is desired future state. Where does the customer want his company to go in the next 2 to 3 years? That is desired future state, immediate future, desired future state. DFS stands for desired future state. It's mentioned at the bottom left of the slide. Is the success, Sujoy is asking, is it the success metrics to be suggested by the seller? Ideally, the buyer should be able to articulate it, but because the buyer may or may not have all the points on the top of his mind, you as a seller would also need to prompt him. So you have to prompt him. Buyer may be able to articulate a few of them, but you, being an expert in his industry, that is how it is expected, you can prompt him. Okay, sir. So then, if you are saying revenue will grow from 50 to $70 million, so does that mean your margin will go up from say $5 to $7.5 million? So you can prompt him. Lakshana is saying, sir, can we get to see a sample case study of how a company applied this? I don't have a ready-made case study right now, but I have myself done it in my career, and many people are doing it. There is nothing, there is no rocket science here. So, but I don't have a ready-made case study which I can share with you right away. Can you show us an example after the exercise is completed by us? Okay, let me see if I can show you some example. Nitish Tag is asking, but you first complete it yourself. Okay, guys, I hope you have got it. So someone is asking for showing an example. I'm going to show you an example now so that you get some idea how it is done. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see the screen which says your offering specialty label and all? This is an, can you all see the screen? Someone asked for an example, that's why I'm showing this example, how the value conversation framework is kind of written. I hope everyone can see the screen. Okay. Someone is saying something. Okay, Jitendra says yes, we can see the screen. Fine. So now look at this. This is for a company which manufactures packaging films. Okay, they are used for any of the consumer packaging which you find in the FMCG. It can be a beverage, it can be the masala, it can be shampoo, it can be anything. They, and sell it to converters who in turn sell it to the big brands. So the customer is Blue Ridge Venture. It's a large company. And this is the salesman who is selling this film. He had a discussion with the CEO and he's saying, what is your desired future state? The CEO said, CEO of Blue Ridge Venture. He said, I want to become the recognized supplier of printed label. And I want to start to export to Middle East and then expand operations. So then he said, okay, fine. So recognized supplier of a printed label means, what does it mean? Success metrics. So that means my sales growth will go up by 100% in the next 2 years, achieving 100 crore milestone. Okay. I will get 10% of my business by exporting. Expand operations to multiple locations. That's my desired future state in the next 2 to 3 years. Success metrics means I will add 2 small units in Pune and Gujarat. That is my success metrics. Okay. Now, if I achieve this in the next 2 to 3 years, Blue Ridge Venture is telling the salesman. Okay. So the salesman asks, what will be the value of success? Then he says, you know what? If I get, increase my sales growth and grow to 100 crore revenue market, then I will be qualifying to be a vendor for top brands like Parle, Pepsi, Coke. At the end, I want to sell to Parle, Pepsi, Coke, but I am not there. They don't consider me as a vendor. But if I can achieve this 100 crore milestone in the next 2 to 3 years, over the next 5-6 years, I will be able to qualify as a vendor and become, sales and increase my market share by selling to top brands like Parle, Pepsi, Coke. So for the next point, if I am able to generate business through export in Middle East and generate 10% of extra 10 crore revenue, then with the additional cash flow, the value of success is I will able to put more machine and hire quality people for my business growth. That is my next point for value success. Third point, expand operations to multiple locations. Meaning, what is the success metrics? What I'll do in the next 2 to 3 years, I want to set up small units in Pune and Gujarat, right? If I do that, how will it help me in the next 6 to 10 years? It will enable me, look at the value of success. It will enable me to service quickly to multiple brands who are already in Pune and Gujarat. Many of my target customers are in Pune and Gujarat, but I lose out this business because I am not locally present. But if I set up units in Pune and Gujarat, I will be able to service them quickly to multiple brands who are already in Pune and Gujarat and would get a lot of business because of my strategic location. This is my value of success. Now, see how these things are getting structured. It's a very good example of, doing the desired future state, success metrics, and value of success. Now, this person will come back and do a homework, go back and talk to the CEO, hey, customer, this is how we are going to enable you in this journey with this particular product by supplying you with these things in this location, with this way, we can make you successful. We are the only person who can enable this journey for you more effectively than anyone else. And this is how I will going to do that. So you have to show that, you have to demonstrate how you are going to do that. This is what value of success, this is what the value conversation framework is. I hope people, you are getting the idea now. I hope this helps. Look at this example, and you go through it. I just, read out, this is how it is generally constructed. This is a very powerful mechanism. Very, very powerful mechanism. Again, you will do selectively only with your top customers and only with the decision makers. You can do it only when you are perceived as an expert by the decision maker. If you just barge into his room, sir, I want to do a DFS, he will kick you out. So please don't even attempt that. So gradually you have to be perceived as an expert in his field. You have to and then only you can kind of invite him into this kind of a conversation. Again, this is not a one-time conversation. And this has to happen. And you cannot say, sir, I'm setting up a 30-minute call to discuss desired future state. No, this has to happen as a part of your general conversations. In a general conversation flow, you have to get these inputs out. You have to extract these inputs in a general conversational flow. Okay. I hope now it's making sense once you see this example. Okay, fine. So we will go back to the slide now. So this is what we have been discussing. This is what the exercise which we just did. Okay. So now we go to the next slide. So buying stages and value selling. So we know that the customer has different buying stages, enterprise customers, right? The first stage is that the customer feels a need. Need means he has a problem, he needs a solution, or he is getting some new ideas, he needs support or help to drive that idea or drive that possibility. That's at an aspiration level. That's his need, right? He's feeling a pain, or he's feeling a possibility, he needs support, or for the pain, he needs a solution. This is the need stage. Then comes the want stage, objectification of the need. He needs food. Okay, that's his need. He's hungry. That is his pain. He needs food, right? So, but he wants dosa, or he wants a burger. That is the objectification. He has already decided that this is I will fulfill my need with this particular want. Then comes the specification. Okay. So specification means the requirements. So first the need comes, then comes the want, then comes requirements. When the customer is decided on the need and want, he will specify the requirement. Means I am hungry. That is my pain. I need the dosa. Okay. No, sorry. I want the dosa. I need food. I am hungry. I need food. I want dosa. Okay. And then say requirement. Dosa means what dosa is, he will specify. It should be a masala dosa. It should not be much oily. It should be within a price band of 50 to 70 rupees. And it should be procured from this location. So these are my requirements. So he's giving the specifications of the want. When you attach specification to the want, it becomes the requirement. And then the fourth stage is evaluate and buy. When the requirements are now circulated in the market, he will just evaluate the vendor and buy, right? Now, where does value selling come? Now, value selling you can do at all the four stages, but the most effective value selling happens at the need stage. When the customer is feeling the pain, or the customer is getting an idea, or is looking at a possibility, new possibility. So this is where value selling is most effective. If the customer has moved past the need and he's already at the want stage, here we generally get into competitive selling, meaning customer wants a dosa. So many dosa sellers are now vying for that, right? So and they may help him define the specification or the requirement. If the customer has already specified the requirement, you don't have much play there. All you can do is fulfillment selling. The customer say, hey, you know what? I want a dosa from masala dosa, less oily, with this specification should be bought from here without any sambar, only with the chutney. So the requirements are already done. Now the vendor, is more on the run for fulfillment. Whoever fulfills it better will win the deal, right? So it's called fulfillment selling. And if specifications and want, if the customer is looking at, okay, specification is done and he's evaluating vendor, whoever, so it's more of transactional selling. It's primarily sold on price. At the transactional level, is primarily sold on price. So value selling is important, and you can do value selling throughout the sales cycle, but especially in hunting scenario, try to do value selling as much as possible at the need stage. So you have to connect with the customer. You have to be perceived as an expert, and you have to understand the rational driver, emotional driver behind the needs and wants, and do the value proposal, value positioning, the broad positioning, winning through what, the competitive value positioning, accordingly. Going to the next slide, look at the x-axis. In the buying cycle, what is the time elapsed, and y-axis possibility of value selling. So as you can see, if you are at the need stage, the possibility of value selling is maximum. If you are at the want stage, you can still do it. But as you go down, as the buying cycle moves on, time elapsed is higher, and the buyer moves on with the buying cycle, the possibility of value selling diminishes. So at the requirement stage or at the buying stage, your possibility of doing value selling is very, very limited. So your entry point for value selling should be at the need point or maximum at the want point. This is what you should try to do. Outcome of effective value selling. As I was saying, the outcome is the customer is so convinced that for their business success, they need you more than you need them. This is the ideal situation. This is where we say that value selling is 100% successful when the customer is convinced that he needs more than you need them. So this is the ultimate objective. So you should do your value selling. You should apply all these 12 fundamentals and the techniques that you have learned over the value selling part 1 and part 2 to ensure that the customer is well on the journey, so that he is convinced that he needs you more than you need him. And these are the 4 things effective value selling will bring you. A, customer lifetime value will increase. Your wallet share with that customer will increase. You can create a great case study out of this success, and you will if you do value selling and the customer needs you more than you need him, that means the customer can be a very big advocate for you. So the advocacy will be higher. What is advocacy? The customer will go out into the market, the customer will go out into the industry and talks positively about you, right? So these are the gains, these are the advantages, or these are the possible outcomes of effective value selling. So that's all we had today, and we'll do a quick quiz and see who can respond. In RDS approach, what do you understand by RD and S? You can put it on the chat. Let me see. There are 3 questions on this quiz. Let me see who gets fast. RDS approach, what do you understand by RD? Yes, we discussed this so many times. Ravindra is getting the R right. Yes. Nitish Taggi got all of them correct. Yes. Govinda, Nitish. Yes. Mahesh. Yes. Nirmal, Ankit, Samir Sinha, all of you got it correct. Right. It's resonate, differentiate, substantiate. Amaya Bhaskar, yes. No, Ankur, you are wrong. Aditya, yes, you are right. So, yes, resonate, differentiate, substantiate. Most of you got it correct. Quiz number 2. In value conversation framework, what is the first step? There are 4 steps, and we have been discussing it for the past half an hour. There are 4 steps. What is the first step in the value conversation framework? Not need, not need. Look at that cycle, that round diagram, value conversation framework. There are 4 steps. What is the first step? Suhel got it correct. Suhel, Govindan got it correct. Nitin got it correct. Sujoy got it correct. Dayanandan got it correct. Yes, you guys are right. The first step is commit the client to the value desired future state. Where do you want to go, right? You have to get that commitment from the client. That is the first step. So many of you got Rajesh, Smriti, all of you got correct. Aditya, yes. Mention one of the primary objective of value conversation framework. We just discussed so many objectives, right? If you, what is one of the objectives of value conversation framework? What will you? Yes. Nirmal is correct. No, if you do value conversation framework, what will be the outcome? What will you gain? Value for success is fine. Primary objective of value conversation framework, while if after you do value for success, once you complete the value conversation framework, what would be the outcome final? See, we just discussed you will increase your customer lifetime, right? Or the customer lifetime value will go up, right? What is the customer lifetime value? The net margin customer. This is what is the CLV, customer lifetime value go up. Fine. So this is all I had for you guys today. And the last slide, this is showing my contact information. Orijit@bizmeconsulting.com is my email ID in case you have any query. All of you will get the recording, the link to the recording from Neha. NASSCOM will share it with you.
Yeah, Orijit, I'm just putting my ID also in the chat section where they can inquire for the recording for this session.
And Neha, my suggestion is when you are sharing this link for this second session, you also include the link for the first session.
I'll just put it again. Yeah.
Yeah. so that, you know, both the links are at the same place and people can access it. So Sujoy is saying, thank you, excellent session. Thanks, fantastic insight. Someone is saying, yes. Rajesh is saying, wonderful session. Mohsin, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, guys. If you find it useful, I'm very happy. Make sure you apply the learnings. It's not an academic exercise. I am myself an hardcore salesperson. I have spent decades of my career in sales. So I'm a hardcore salesperson. I want you to not take this as an academic exercise. You must apply these learnings and see how you are kind of getting the benefits. These are all proven techniques. And I can guarantee you, if you apply them correctly, you will be effective in generating more revenue, more margin, and more success for your business. So I see a lot of you putting thank you notes. And again, I would like to thank you for your patience and making it so participative. We got a lot of interesting and valuable questions. All the questions were very, very important questions. All of you asked and useful questions. And really thank you for this participation. And again, the proof of the pudding is in eating. Kindly apply this on your day-to-day life. You will get a lot of benefits out of this.
And
So with that, I will turn it over to you, Neha.
Yeah, I would like to especially thank you for this insightful session. It was fabulous. I see a lot of people even asking for presentation, and they are even saying that the session is amazing. And thanks to our participants for joining us for this session. Thank you, everyone. It was great.
Thank you very much. Ramchandra says presentation simple and excellent. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for appreciating this session. Once again, thank you all, and you guys have a great day ahead. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.